Saturday, July 28th. Oh, King of Kings, what a day yesterday was, and what a day today is turning out to be. Right now, I'm sitting on Aunt Radine and Uncle Carl Joe's front porch on this great red wooden swing that's screwed into the ceiling of the porch. Down in front of me is a hill, and on it is the graveyard. Spooky. I'll start with yesterday. Carl Ray and I left home about noon. I was in charge of the map, and he was in charge of the driving. Oh, boy, Carl Ray drives like a maniac. I was fearing for my life the whole time. He speeds along at about 90 miles an hour and swerves around cars to pass them and never uses his turn signals, and he hates to stop. I had to beg him after about 4 hours to please stop so I could go to the bathroom. We didn't talk hardly at all, thank goodness. I brought along the Odyssey and pretended to be engrossed in that. Every now and then, he would ask me what part I was on, and when I told him, he would say, "Oh, yeah, I like that part." Or, "Oh, that's a good part." He really knows that book. I think he must have memorized it or something. Anyway, we only got lost once, and we finally arrived at Aunt Radine's at 9 o'clock. Aunt Radine and all of Carl Ray's brothers and sisters, Arvie Joe, John Roy, Lee Bob, Sue Ann, Sally Lynn, and Brenda May, everybody has two names, like me, were waiting on the porch and started jumping up and down and waving and acting like lunatics. The only one who wasn't there was Uncle Carl Joe. At first, I thought it was kind of nice, such a great reception and all. But then, when we got out of the car, everyone jumped all over Carl Ray and started hugging him and messing his hair, and I realized they weren't at all excited to see me. After about an hour of that, Aunt Radian finally noticed me standing there looking like an idiot, and she came over and hugged me, and then everyone else did too. So it was about another half hour of people messing up my hair. They're sure a happy bunch. Then we had to go in and eat dinner. Aunt Radine said, "Gosh, we're starving to death. We usually eat up at 5, but we're waiting on y'all. Gosh, I'm as happy as pumpkin and patch to say you." That's just the way she talks. Honest, I'm not making it up. Uncle Carl Joe was already sitting at the kitchen table. He glanced up when Carl Ray came in, and everybody went quiet and stared at the two of them. Then Carl Ray said, "Hey," and Uncle Carl Joe nodded very soberly, and everybody started crowding around the table. It's pretty easy to tell that Carl Ray and his father were not on the best of terms. About 3 tons of food was spread on the table: fried chicken, mashed potatoes, gravy, bread, green beans, squash, biscuits, tomatoes, corn, and peaches. Then for dessert, pecan pie and apple pie and molasses pie. For a family that seems poor as anything, like I said, no electricity and no plumbing in the house. And the house looks like it hasn't been painted in about 200 years. They sure have a lot of food on the table. I don't know how in the world Carl Ray was so skinny when he first came to our house. Carl Ray had about 10 helpings of food, which was a little embarrassing because he made it look like we never feed him. Everyone kept asking Carl Ray what it was like in the city and kept trying to say, and I kept trying to say, it isn't a city we live in. Easton is just a little suburb. It's about 10 miles from a big city. But they kept on about the city, asking him how many murders he'd seen and how many times he'd been held up by robbers and all that kind of sum and substance. Honestly. They also kept asking Carl Ray about his car, and I thought he'd tell them about the money and the college education, but you could tell he was saving it for another time because he looked real embarrassed whenever they mentioned it. They kept saying things like, "You sure must make a lot of money in the city," and "Wow, Carl Ray, you're going to be a millionaire," and on and on. It was as if he didn't want to tell them about the money. Uncle Carl Joe didn't say a word. Then, about 10:30, when we had finished eating, everybody got up, and Aunt Radine said, Best turn in, we chawing on tomorrow. And in about 10 minutes, everybody was in bed, except for Sue Ann and Sally Lynn, who were doing the dishes. I did ask if I could help, but they said no. So I just went to bed. I was really tired and also feeling really homesick for everybody. I wonder if Carl Ray felt this way when he came to stay with us. How did he stand it? Everybody's so nice to him here, and he's lapping it up like a little dog. And they're all looking at me as if I'm the strange one. And I can hardly get a word in. Not that I would know what to say if I did get the chance. So I don't say too much, just like Carl Ray at our house. It makes you think, doesn't it? It's a little hard to get used to how primitive this place is. I still haven't gone to the bathroom. I did walk out to the outhouse. Oh, supreme being, I'd forgotten just how awful the outhouse is. It's so dark inside, the only light that can get in is a little sunlight from a hole cut high up one wall. But also through that hole comes flies and wasps and creepy spiders. There are spider webs in all the corners. I don't even want to mention the smell. Ugh. I'll wait until I'm absolutely desperate before I go in there. Maybe Carl Ray was afraid of our bathroom. As afraid of our bathroom as I am of his. Maybe he was used to all this back to nature summoned substance. Later the same day, I'm back on the porch swing. I've been sitting here most of the day writing letters. Everybody else has been rushing around doing chores, and whenever I ask if I can help, they say, "Nah, you just sit a while." I'm getting tired of sitting while. Still later the same day. I think Aunt Radine has the flu. She did make dinner tonight, though. We had fried chicken, again, because it's Carl Ray's favorite. Gravy, boiled potatoes, corn on the cob, tomatoes, sweet potatoes, and fried peppers. Then for dessert, we had chocolate pudding with whipped cream, and also cherry jello with bits of peaches inside. We almost didn't get to the pudding because Aunt Radine dropped it. Arby Joe was asking Carl Ray if he was sure he hadn't seen any murders yet in the city. And Carl Ray said, "The only dead body I've seen what?" But he didn't finish because that's when the pudding slipped out of Aunt Radine's hands. She doesn't like to hear about dead people, I can tell. Then, while Aunt Radine was scooping up the pudding, Arvy Joe asked Carl Ray about his job in the hardware store. So Carl Ray told them about stocking and orders and all that boring quintessence. Arvy Joe said, "They sure must pay you a lot if you can afford that car." Carl Ray looked right at me, and I knew it was a warning. So I didn't say anything. Not until Arvy Joe kept going on and on about how much money Carl Ray must be earning. Just to participate a little in the conversation, I said, "Well, Carl Ray's lucky. People keep giving him things." Carl Ray gave me a dirty look. "Like what?" Sally Lynn said. I was in trouble now. I fished around and fished around. "Well, like a job?" Carl Ray relaxed a little. "And a ring?" Carl Ray gave me the dirty look again. "A ring?" said Aunt Radine. I was about to explain that it was the ring from Uncle Carl Joe, but then Uncle Carl Joe said, "A ring? What the blazes for?" Everybody looked at Uncle Carl Joe. I think those were the first words he said to Carl Ray since we arrived. I couldn't tell if Uncle Carl Joe was pretending he hadn't given the ring to Carl Ray, or if he thought I meant that Carl Ray had been given another ring. Carl Ray was staring at me. Then I realized that Carl Ray knew that the only way I could have known someone had given that ring to him in the first place was if I had been snooping in his drawers and read that card. I tried to move on. I said, "Oh, well, he gave it away anyway." "You gave it away?" said Aunt Radine to Carl Ray. "You gave it away?" said Lee Bob and Sue Ann. "Would you go and give the ring away for?" asked Uncle Carl Joe. But it was about this time that Aunt Radine fainted dead away on the floor. Fortunately, she missed the pudding mess. And Uncle Carl Joe and Sue Ann and Lee Bob all jumped up and started patting her face, and everybody else was crowding around, and then they carried her into the bedroom. Carl Ray stayed in the room with her, and the rest of us went back out and ate dessert. Sally Lynn said we could eat the pudding because the floor was clean enough to eat up off of, and it wouldn't hurt us none. It was good, even though I did find a dog hair in mine. But I didn't tell anyone. So then Sue Ann, Sally Lynn, and Brenda May did the dishes. I asked if I could help, but they said no. And now everybody's getting ready for bed, and I'm sitting here in the kitchen, writing by the kerosene lamp. Aunt Radine is still in bed, but I can hear her voice. She's talking to Carl Ray, so she must feel a little better. I sure would like to know why Uncle Carl Joe seems so mad at Carl Ray and why they don't talk to each other. And I sure would like to know when Carl Ray's going to tell everybody about the money and the college education. Maybe he wants them all to believe he's making a ton of money working in a hardware store. I'm going to the outhouse. I can't put it off any longer. If I don't come back, tell Alex I love him. And my parents too. And Maggie, Dennis, Dougie, and Tommy. Sunday, July 29th. I survived the outhouse. After breakfast, I went with Lee Bob, Sue Ann, and Sally Lynn to the swimming hole. It is the greatest place in the world. You have to climb a big hill out back, and then go through some woods, and then down a steep hill by way of a narrow path. And at the bottom of this hill is a creek, and you follow the creek along for a while, and then you come to the swimming hole. It's not very big, maybe 15 feet across, but it's pretty deep in the middle. There are trees hanging over it, so when you float on your back, you can look up and see tons of leaves. All around the edges are old fallen logs. One of these sticks out into the water, and Lee Bob dives off of it. No one else is brave enough to. Well, we were having a great time. I thought I was in a magical place. But all of a sudden, Lee Bob yells, "Snapper!" And everybody starts flailing around and trying to get to shore. I don't know what was going on. They're all yelling at me to go out, get out, and hurry up. And boy, oh boy, I scrambled out so fast. They were all pointing over to one side. "What is it?" I kept saying, "Snapper, snapper." "What's a snapper?" They all looked at me like I was an imbecile. "Snapping turtle, dummy," Lee Bob said. You mean there's a snapping turtle in there?" I said. "Couple of them. You gotta watch it or they'll get your toes." After a while, everybody went back in the water. Everybody but me. I'd had enough swimming for one day.